real quick rehash. I've already done this in a video series in a mathematical sense, which has nothing to do with, I mean, it has something to do with this, but it's on a way different level. But this is just a quick tangent, just so that you have an understanding, right? With respect to intelligence, right? So we have the things that we know, the things that we know that we do not know, and then the things that we know that we don't even know that we don't know. And I've done this in a logical analysis, mathematical analysis that I'm not going to do now because that is just another level. But the point is, with respect to, if you want to watch that discourse, just type in Rumsfeld in my search box in YouTube, on my YouTube homepage, Rumsfeld, hit enter, and it'll pop up, right? But the things that we know that we know. We know that the terrorists have bombs. Things that we know that we don't know. We know that we do not know how many bombs they actually have. And things that we don't even know that we don't know, well, that's the doomsday scenario. The things that we don't even know is the thing that makes us the most vulnerable. That thing, the thing that makes us the most vulnerable is the intelligence, the information, right? So the things that we know, we're as protected as we can possibly be from a national security affairs standpoint, right? So if we're talking about national and homeland security, the things that we know, and obviously I've done another video on this as well, we don't want our enemies to know that we know. We act as if we don't know. But the things that we know, we're as safe as we can possibly be given the circumstances. Things that we don't know is going to drive much of our intelligence community. We know that they have bombs, but we don't know how many they have. We don't know where they have them. And our intelligence gathering is built on primarily the things that we know that we do not know. And then Rumsfeld says, the things we don't even know that we don't know, right? We can't protect ourselves from things we don't even know. There's a new massive means of destroying populations that we don't even know exist. And that's the threat, right? So, and again, I've already done an analysis of this, but from a far more sort of theoretical, mathematical approach. But the idea is, when we're talking about intelligence, we're presuming, right? We're presupposing that there is a body of information out there, and that information, right? And this is important, right? That information is essential to stabilizing national security, right? So if we're talking about national security, not in a theoretical level, but in a real sense, and interchange national with homeland, right? If we're talking about homeland security, if we're talking about national security, there is no sense in which you can effectively talk about national or homeland security without addressing intelligence, right? Intelligence and intelligence gathering, the amount of information that we have is absolutely important. Information from sort of a national security level, right? We always want to make sure that information is siphoned back into the bureaucracy, obviously the feds, right? The federal government, right? We want to make sure that information is always siphoned back into the federal government, right? Once information is siphoned back into, we get to know, right? Oh, well, we know now that there's a threat. Or we recognize that there's more information. And we'll talk about the obvious function of dissemination, right? So the collection and gathering, analysis of information, and then the dissemination of information. But all of that information is going through and attains its greatest significance in the national federal government. So national security is absolutely important to recognize the role of knowledge and information, because that's what it really is all about. Information, as much as is out there, needs to be, in a sense, consumed by, think about the national government is like Pac-Man, right? It needs to eat all the pellets, right? It needs to be a warehouse of information, right? And as I've said in my videos, and as is the case in all my YouTube channels, education and information is power, right? So the three phases, that was a bit of a tangent, but the three phases of intelligence gathering, intelligence assessment, collecting the intelligence, which assumes that there's information there, the analysis of that information, the analysis of that intelligence, and the dissemination of that intelligence. Seems pretty generic, pretty basic. What I wanted to do is to illustrate conceptually what that might look like. So I created this diagram, and instead of talking about collection, analysis, and dissemination of intelligence, of information. I'm just going to talk about the CAD, C-A-D, the CAD model. And the CAD, obviously, it's sort of my vernacular, refers to collection, analysis, dissemination, right? So instead of saying collection, analysis, and dissemination, just CAD. Okay, so with respect to this CAD model of intelligence handling, if you will, more specifically, because it's not just gathering, it's the handling of intelligence, again, we're going to have an assumption that there's information there, right? And I am buying some new markers, like, as soon as possible. We're going to assume that there's information. Actually, let me just get rid of the black ones. We're going to assume that there's information to be had. I-N-F-O-R-M-A-T-I-O-N. So there is information out there in the world. Obviously, this information is critical to increasing our defense, right? We need to know better ways of increasing our defense nationally, or this information is critical to us protecting ourselves from a threat, right? It might be an all-hazards threat, or it might be a generational threat, as discussed by Massey in the previous section. If you're just watching, go back to the video, to the beginning of the series, so that you have an understanding of that, right? Then what we recognize is, for example, imagine that we have bits of information 1, bits of information 2, bit of information 3. So we have 3 bits of information. It doesn't matter what it is, right? So the only thing that's important is that this information isn't the same as this information, and this isn't the same as that. So there's a bit of information out there, 1. There's another bit of information out there, 2. There's another bit of information out there, 3. Just generally. Remember, I'm trying to keep it really ghetto, really general. Okay. This information is then channeled, right? This information is then channeled to a focal point, right? And this channeling of information is the source of collection. I'm collecting this information. I'm grabbing this bit of information, I'm grabbing this bit of information, I'm grabbing this bit of information, and I'm collecting this information in a structure, right? So I create a bureaucracy for collecting this information, right? So you can think of, if you were to talk about, I do systems design, and I lecture on systems design. There could be a sense, and there is a sense in which you can talk about the systems design of the intelligence community, right? You could effectively talk about the systems design of the intelligence community, and this is exactly what I'm discussing now, the conceptual intelligence systems design of intelligence, right? Since I recognize that, just roughly speaking, there are these 3 phases. Remember, I'm not talking about storage, but there are these 3 phases of intelligence. Then, in creating a bureaucracy for the management and handling of intelligence, I want to make sure that there is a collection bureaucracy, a building where information is kept, to be really, really generic, really, really simple. Okay. Then we get to the point where all of this information, then the collected information, is then funneled to another branch of the system, right? All of this is one unified system, and this intel that was otherwise distinct is now, after it's been collected, it's now disseminated, not really disseminated, I don't use, it's transferred to another branch of the system. And this branch is the analytic, right? The branch is going to analyze the information. So they're going to analyze the information, and I'm just really generally, let's say it's like 1 plus 2 plus 3, right? 1 might not know about the existence of the bit of information 2. 3 might not know about the bit of the existence of information 1. All of that information is collected. It is then analyzed, and that individuals at this level recognize and try to make sense of, is there a sense in which any of this information is connected, right? And if it is connected, then this is an advantage, right? Because it might be the case that these different bits of information, or these different groups, or these different cells, to be technical, don't want us, those in control of the system of intelligence management, to know that they are associated. So they act as though they're separate groups. But what if it's the case that they're not separate groups, that they really do have, there really is an overarching structure There's no way to identify that overall.